Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is going to be an informal conversation between Gabriela Vainsencher, who's the artist whose work we're going to be talking about, and me. I'm Alun Williams. I'm a painter, and I've been a board member of the Triangle Arts Association in New York for far too long, probably, well, quarter of a century or so. And Triangle is an organization that exists to support artists by giving them time and space to work. It was founded in New York in 1982. So the association in New York is the founding member of what today is a global network, really is all over the world. And that network was developed by artists participating in one part of the network and then going home and creating a sister program. So it's very much an organic network of affiliates. And what I do have to say is that we had a little technical problem because this is the second time we're recording this part of the conversation, because there was a little glitch and the first few minutes didn't get recorded. So we're trying to do them again. So it's a bit weird, but hopefully it'll fill in so that the whole thing is understandable. I'm sure you'll be able to see where the two pieces get stitched together, but maybe not, you never know. And so Gabriela Vainsencher is an artist who has really a kind of a multicultural background. She was born in South America and was raised for some years there before going to Tel Aviv, and has latterly been living in New York City, where she finished her master's degree at Hunter College. So before we get into the meat of the conversation, perhaps you'd like to say a couple of things to say hello, Gabriela.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having this talk and re-recording the intro. For me, Triangle Arts Association is a really special place. And just now that you said it was founded in '82, I was born in 1982, so we're the same age, Triangle and I. And for me, so yeah, I came to the US when I was 22, and I actually took a bunch of years between my undergrad and graduate degree, which I only got in 2017. And Triangle was one of the places where I had multiple residencies and opportunities before I went to graduate school in New York. So it was one of the places that, I applied to through open calls and got exhibitions, residencies, some funding, and most importantly, a community of artists and friends that I still have to this day. So Triangle has been instrumental in supporting me and my work for many years now. So we met in 2010, and it's 12 years later. And Triangle is, again supporting my work by having this talk, even though the project I did in the Bronx was not related to Triangle. So for me, it's a really important opportunity to acknowledge arts organizations that stay in the lives of their artists long term, because I think that's really important, and for me, it's made a big difference. So thanks.
You're very welcome. And we're going to end up talking about your installation at the Bronx Museum, which is called Mom, and is on show until March 20th.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah.
2022. And so, as you said, your first encounter with Triangle was at the Triangle workshop in 2010. The Triangle workshop being kind of the signature program of Triangle, which is a 2-week experience for between 20 and 30 artists, where essentially they're given food, lodgings, space to work, and visiting critics and so on. So that was when we first met, and 2010 was right in the middle of a 4-year project that you were doing called the Morning Drawing Project. And
yeah,
I think
so let me pull that up.
I think it's interesting to talk about that project, because what you did at Triangle was right in the middle of you doing this project, and kind of was influenced by it.
Yeah. So Morning Drawing, which you can still see the entire archive of on a website I made especially for it called morningdrawing.com, was a drawing project that lasted for 4 years, in which I made a drawing every day, a work on paper. Some of them were more like paintings, and some were really very line-based or text-based. So I made a drawing every morning, scanned it, and posted it on a website that I made for it. This is before social media and Instagram and platforms that are kind of designed for this kind of thing. But for me, like I was saying before, Morning Drawing was this project that kind of held my practice and held my studio, since I didn't yet have a community. A lot of this time I couldn't afford even to have a studio, so I worked at home. So I remember when I started making Morning Drawing, that my thought was, well, if I make art every day, that must mean I'm an artist, no matter what kind of exhibition opportunities I may or may not have, and whether I'm like in grad school or not, or all these things that kind of mark you as part of the community. Morning Drawing was a way to create a little world for myself. And it's a bit of a, like when I look through it, it's a bit of a diary for me, because I remember where I was in 2012 making this little painting, and you can kind of search through the entire archive here on the left and see the about 1,200 drawings that I made as part of this.
And I read, I don't know whether it was on the Morning Drawing website, but it's you said that the Morning Drawing project was the laboratory in which most of my other projects have had their beginnings.
That's true.
So I think it's really important, because everything is in there.
Yeah.
And when we then look at the piece you did for the Triangle Artist Workshop, it kind of corresponds, because there are these weird figures that you can see here that are both abstract and figurative. It's like a figure, it's like a presence that is going along this kind of film strip, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah, and within that residency, I made these kind of standalone pieces as well that were hanging in this kind of room. It was orange because we had peeled off the wallpaper, and that's the glue. And I made these standalone pieces. They're basically like these two ghostly figures that came from, splotches of paint becoming figures. And then those were the basis of a stop motion animation I made during the residency, of those figures kind of appearing, reappearing, meshing into each other, disappearing. And, as I was telling you before we started the talk, it was also kind of me working through the fact that I just met someone and had fallen madly in love with this stranger that I went on the first date with 2 days before the residency started. And I now have a 3-year-old daughter with my husband, Daniel. So it was also very, very influenced by meeting this person and wondering what was going to happen. And
That's really interesting, because it means that, like the mom sculpture, this work is also autobiographical. It's a lot less obvious. They don't look like love paintings,
Yeah.
but you know, that's very interesting link. You know, this idea of going through all these works as we move towards talking about the mom piece, it really, what strikes me is that amazing quote from Albert Camus, who said, an artist always makes the same work of art again and again, even if it looks completely different.
I didn't know he said that, but I say that all the time, a version of that all the time. Yeah, I totally believe that.
You know, I'm just a painter, and you do just about everything else, and painting.
Yeah.
And that means that your work is often very different, including in terms of its medium. But I think it's incredibly fascinating to look at these different works in respect to how they are ultimately the same piece of work, and they're very linked.
Yeah.
To all of the things that you're almost incapable of not talking about.
Yeah.
Like your background.
Yeah, I think, you know, I didn't know Camus said that, and I really love that. And the way I've thought of it is, I think every artist has like a few questions that they're trying to answer, and you know, and we work through those questions in our work. For me, since I am kind of an interdisciplinary artist, and I work in video and photo, and this is for the next show that I did with Triangle. There's sculptures, paper, video. I changed my form and I changed my materials, but I think a lot about my biography, being this kind of double or triple immigrant. As you mentioned in my bio, my parents also came from Uruguay, and before that from Eastern Europe. Thinking a lot about how my biography influences my work, even when it's totally abstract.
So this image is actually the exhibition at the museum in Le Havre.
Yeah.
Which was, for several years, we had an exchange between the city of Le Havre and Triangle in New York. So we were sending artists in both directions. And I think this was the only time that we managed to include an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in Le Havre, which was,
it was a great opportunity.
Yourself and Cynthia Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very lucky because I was at the opening of that exhibition. Which,
oh yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah. And the piece, particularly the film piece that you made here, is
you can see some.
It's very powerful, and I think also links very strongly into, you know, this, you know, I'm kind of trying to make some kind of linear argument about your work evolving, but it does that so much. And what you did in arriving at Le Havre is you realize this weird link between Le Havre and Jerusalem, in the sense that both of them were destroyed. Le Havre more recently in the Second World War, when it was bombed by the Allies, which I, you know, I have trouble thinking about it, because when the German occupiers refused to surrender, particularly the Royal Air Force, the British army, bombed it to smithereens. And
literally,
they didn't seem to make any concessions to the presence of the civilians, which seems, when you look at the history, it seems like it was unnecessary. But anyway, that's what happened. And so the modern day Le Havre was built on the ruins of the previous Le Havre, as I understand, and it's what's explained in your film, as Jerusalem was. And the thing that is that you incredibly appropriated and made it part of your work is the very strange stones on the beach of Le Havre, which essentially, when you go on the beach, you see these nice round stones, worn by the sea. And then you suddenly, if you don't know the story, you suddenly have this shock in realizing that they're actually bricks and mortar that are the remains of the buildings that have just been, taken over by the sea and made into beach pebbles.
Yeah. Yeah, so when I came to the residency, we were sent there. Cynthia and I were sent there by Triangle for 3 months to make work, and later we found out very happily that we were going to get shows at the museum, so it was going to be shown there as well. And for a long time, I didn't know what to make. I didn't have an idea. But then I would walk on the beach. I would go for walks on the beach, which is beautiful, but also kind of very somber. It was a kind of a gray, very dramatic beach. And I started picking up these stones, and that's how I found out the history. I found out that they're not stones, that they're rubble, and that the Le Havre actually was elevated 3 feet, 1 meter. It's taller than what it used to be because it's built on its own ruins, which actually solved a lot of drainage problems in Le Havre. It used to flood a lot, but after it was destroyed completely and rebuilt, it was rebuilt on its own rubble, which I found very affecting. And also, again, as kind of an echo of biography, I feel like I also feel like I am built on the ruins of the past, like all of us. Like every single wave of immigration in my family came influenced by some huge political power that we had no influence over, whether it's the Holocaust or the dictatorship in South America, etc. I feel like my life and my family's life is also built on the ruins of history. So I felt a really strong connection to that story just as a human being. So then I photographed those rocks. I enlarged the photographs. I made them into masks. It was all kind of an intuitive process that then eventually led to the video.
And this thing of the abstract figure, I think it obviously relates very closely to what I do, which is maybe why I'm always excited by it. But that's what was happening in that piece you did at the Triangle workshop. Yeah. And that's what's happening here, where there are these abstract forms that are kind of saying that they're also representing a figure, the presence of a figure.
Yeah.
And we're going to see that in the other works as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can we see a bit of the film?
Yeah.
So I think it's only a couple of minutes, but it's worth
having. It's a little under 4 minutes, the part that we're gonna see. Okay, so let me try to make it. Yeah, here we go.
The city was destroyed by the moon. It happened like that. After the moon hit, the city used the dust created by all the houses, dogs, lampposts, trees, cameras, swimming pools, theaters, bicycles, cafes, cats, pillows, and books that were destroyed to build itself again. It was almost all used up to build the new beautiful city. The leftover pieces ending up on the beach, where the sea helped them become round and smooth and forget what had happened to them.
Dans la vieille ville de Jérusalem, lorsque tu t'arrêtes aux stations du chemin de croix le long de la Via Dolorosa, on ne te dit jamais que tu te trouves en fait un étage au-dessus des rues et des constructions de l'époque, enterrées sous 2 millénaires de poussière et de cendres.
So, yeah, so that's reconstruction.
Right.
Yeah, so I had these 3 narratives there. There was the narrative that we talked about with Loav, the narrative of Jerusalem, a city that's also built on its own ruins just for having existed for so many years. And I added this another layer of an imaginary scenario of a city that was destroyed by the moon, where the moon hits it and then it's rebuilt. And I wanted to bring in this feeling of randomness, this feeling like when something terrible happens, it's almost like you were selected by lots to have this terrible thing happen to your city, to your place. And I thought it's like as if the moon would just crash down on this one particular place, and what would happen to it.
What comes over very strongly to me, and particularly looking at this image, is you've been mostly working in 2 dimensions, or at least on drawing surfaces, paper, for a long time, and in all of this this installation and this film, there's an incredible desire for matter.
Yeah,
you're wanting those amazing stones, so you're photographing them and making them 3-dimensional, but it's a 2D surgery.
I always kind of end up in the 2D realm, no matter how much I want to go 3D.
Right.
Yeah.
And the lengths of paper, or I don't know, I can't remember whether there was fabric here too.
Yeah, paper.
Right. You're putting them in the space to make them talk about the space and volume and 3D, the 3D side of things.
Yeah, and water also.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know how long after this, but not too long, you began to make more sculpture, and the whole, I guess, discovery of porcelain happens sometime.
Yeah.
This, and porcelain becomes an incredible medium for you to talk about all these things, the abstract figure, the body,
Mm-hmm.
and you do that in many ways in a number of different series of pieces.
Yeah, so I can I can show a few of those.
Maybe this series called Props is a good one, because it as I understand it, you had a kind of performative element with those tubes that are called props, because
Yeah, let me find props.
They can almost become like prosthetics.
Yeah. So props, I started working in porcelain in grad school at Hunter to make literally props for a video, which became my thesis video. So again, it was a 3-dimensional form that became 2-dimensional because it was to be shown on a screen. I had these, and this is kind of a whole other topic, but I made a video that was about the creative process, but was also a portrait of my mother, who's a psychoanalyst, but was also kind of about our conversations and the parallels between the psychoanalytic process and the creative process. And it's called Negative Capability, which basically means like how to work out of the place in which you don't know what to do, or you don't know what's going on. How to work out of a place of mystery, and how to really accept this thing of I don't know what's going on, and how do I go on and create something. So when I was making this video, I had these objects in my head that I wanted to have in the video, but they didn't exist. So I decided to make them out of porcelain. And these are the sculptures. So these are the first porcelain sculptures I made, and they appeared both on screen, but they also appeared again as photographs. I photographed them, I turned them into masks, this time these kind of cylinders that I moved around my face. And they accompanied a monologue that I created out of my conversations with my mother. So you hear my mother's voice, and she talks about being a psychoanalyst. So yeah, here are the sculptures. They're very, very simple cylinders that have been kind of twisted and buckled and misshapen in a lot of different ways to become very bodily, to become very like skin, like flesh. Yeah.
And then I think the next step after this is a series called The Collapsed, which is going further in using porcelain to talk about body parts. And it coincides with the big event in your life, because you get pregnant.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let me find those.
So I guess there must be kind of this, changes in your body and awareness of your body. And so you start making these body parts.
Yeah. Here they are.
Which are amazing, because they're sometimes they're clearly body parts, but they're also these abstract presences that, for me, again, like an abstract presence, a human presence.
Yeah. So here's one. Yeah. So I was working on this show. It was a 2-person show in Chelsea at what is now Hess Flatow Gallery, and was then called Crush Curatorial, with another artist named Brittany Nelson that Nicole Cack curated. And I started working on it right as I finally got pregnant after a long time of trying. My plan had been to make these flat porcelain works, completely flat, completely upright, completely white. There were just outlines of these drawings that I'd made that are a combination of body parts and ancient vessels, like amphoras and all these kinds of ancient Greek vessels. But then, here's another one. I was in my my first trimester of pregnancy, which a lot of people who have been pregnant have had this experience where the first trimester, you're not showing at all. It's invisible that you're pregnant, but you're so tired. I was so tired. I'd never been so exhausted in my life. I was so nauseous all the time. I really had 2 hours of energy every day, just 2 hours. So I would plan. I was like, okay, what do I want to do in my 2 hours today that I don't have to be horizontal? And that was the studio time in which I prepared this show. And then I realized that, like, I can't make these perfect, upright, white things. I had to make something that felt more like me. So I took these objects that were supposed to be made to be totally flat and upright and white, and I let them kind of collapse, and I colored into all their wrinkles and their cracks. I let them kind of sit as they lay. I let them collapse the same way that I was collapsing, which was both, okay, they were very weak and they were very like twisted, but they also made it, you know, like they turned into sculptures. And I was very identified with them in that time where I thought, okay, I can't be upright really. I feel like a rumpled piece of body on the floor, but I can make it. I have a show and I'm going to make it. And that's what these pieces became. And they were really very, very important to make, both creatively, but personally as well, in this kind of transformation to become an artist who's also a mother.
So, you know, I'm going to go back to the Camus quote, because, you know, on the face of it, when you see these, okay, they're in porcelain and have a similar surface quality to Mom, but they look completely different. But ultimately, they're not, because they're about, I mean, future motherhood, I suppose, at that time. Yeah. But they're about your body. They're autobiographical.
Yeah.
So in a way, they're almost like sketches for Mom.
Yeah, and here they are at the show. And the thing that happened between this and Mom, which we'll get to, is that here I wasn't telling anybody I was pregnant. Nicole found out, the curator, Nicole found out because she came to a studio visit where I was kind of trying to explain to her why I've changed completely the plan for the show without telling her why. But as I was flipping through my phone to show her sketches, I flipped into my first sonogram, which I took a picture of. And I kind of quickly flipped back and I said, well, I guess you know why this is all changing. And then she was one of the first people I told. But still, I kept it kind of a secret. You know, no one at the opening knew I was pregnant. I had another show afterwards, a group show in the Lower East Side. I kept it so secret. And later in the first year of my daughter's life, there was this whole thing. Should people know that I'm a mother? Is that gonna influence the way they take me? Are they gonna take me as seriously, or am I gonna get kind of pulled into this kind of artist mom thing? Worried about.
That's what you just said is interesting in relation to this discovery, inadvertent discovery by Nicole. Did that help her to then accept and understand this work that had changed completely?
Well, yeah. First of all, she was totally supportive, even without knowing. She said, "Oh, that's interesting. Great. Like, let's go with where the work is going." So I found out a lot of my concerns about being kind of judged, being not understood, being not taken seriously, a lot of them didn't materialize. Like, actually, none of these bad things had ever happened to me. But I was worried about it for good reason, because historically it has happened to a lot of people as they become parents. But Nicole was totally fine with it. But then when she saw the sonogram, it helped her understand where I was coming from. And I think only a long time later, around the time I was making Mom, did that kind of click for me, that not only is it okay to show the connection between the work and my biography, but it's actually better for the work and for me. And to be open and honest about where the work is coming from is what makes it relatable and human and interesting. But this took me a long time to come to terms with, because I think, like a lot of artists, I had this kind of idea in my head that I'm still trying to shake, that we are supposed to present ourselves in some sort of idealized way. to the world. And I don't know, I think it's like a hang up from this kind of myth of the artist's genius, and to have it completely disconnected from life. And I'm really trying to shed that in my life and in my work as well.
I mean, that's also part of the kind of schizophrenic nature of being an artist, where you have to have the introverted side to make the work, which can be very solitary. And then you're supposed to also have the extroverted side that goes out and gives it to the world, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd really like to talk about, following on from that, about the Back Dirt series of photographs, because suddenly it's almost like a U-turn, where, you know, we've been talking about all of these very intimate things related to what's happening to you and your body, and then you change medium, you start making these photographs.
Yeah, which I'm still making.
Yeah, I love them. I think the whole project is very interesting, because it also involves this thing of a found book, as I understand it, an old French archaeology book.
Yeah.
Did you find that in Le Havre by any chance?
No, I found it at Hunter College at the studios.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I later found out this is one of the kind of seminal archaeology books from the 50s. It's very, very well known. I have a friend who's an archaeologist who, even just from looking at these photographs, knew which book they came from, because the images are so well known in that world. So yeah, so Back Dirt is a photography project that I'm still doing, and I started it a long time ago. I've been making it for a few years now. And what they're photographs. I brought some pictures of the photographs themselves, and some of them kind of in situ, so people can see what they look like. So for example, this is what this photograph looks like when it's hanging on the wall. So there are photographs that kind of look like collages, but they're not collages. They're just one piece of paper. And what they are is they are photographs of these pages from an archaeology book that has already been cut up. So one of my colleagues at Hunter was making collages, and they threw out this book after cutting a bunch of stuff out of it to use for their collages. And I just found the pages with the holes, with what was missing. And I, of course, loved it, because I love historical ruin, mystery, body, all these things. And I started making these compositions out of them and photographing the compositions of the layered pages. And yeah,
when you say composition, you just mean deciding an order of the cut out pages, one on top of the other, right?
Yeah, so here I'll show you. I brought you some behind the scenes photographs. So this is how I photograph these. I take a bunch of pages that have holes in them from the book, and I arrange them and I clip them to my board. You can see my messy dining room behind there. And I play around with them. So I will change the lighting. I will create space between the layers of the pages until I see what I'm looking for, and then I shoot it. And this is the finished photograph, which I'm going to, this is still not public. This is a piece that's going to debut on Zwirner Gallery's platform website in the coming months with Ben Tischer from Invisible Exports, from New Discretions now. So then I turn them into these photographs of, I think of them as kind of things that are here but are not here. You know, there's the most clear thing that you see is the form of this vase, but that is the one thing that's not here. It's the hole in the form of this vase, and inside are shards and pieces of other things. So in a way, it's still like the same work because it's something that's made out of layers of ruin and of shards from before. It's also my research because my interest in ceramics and in clay and in history, it leads me to look at a lot of archaeology and a lot of ancient imagery. So it's what I look at when I, you know, when I want to be inspired, when I'm looking for new shapes. Here's another one from the same series.
A lot of them also look like figures, and a lot of them are figures.
Yeah, I have
so
a lot
again,
of,
for me anyway.
yeah, like this one in particular, I have a lot of figures. This one, the reason this one is printed at this size is that if you measure this figure here, that we can only see her kind of her hips and her hand and a bit of her leg, that this figure is my height. So I am 1.63 meters or 5'3". And if you measure from here to here, that is my height. So she is kind of a reflection of me in that way. So that's when I print the photos really big, it's often because they have a figure in them that I enlarge to be that size.
So there, weirdly, again, there's you've injected a little kind of mirror autobiography thing.
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing is we've been speaking for 50 minutes and we still haven't talked about Mom. So
Shall
we
we?
better do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we are. Here she is.
And again, I just feel like although that series that we just looked at is so extremely different in every way,
yeah,
it's very, very related, and it's the same thing in the end.
Yeah. Here's Ben Tischer looking at the piece just to give you a sense of scale. So I brought you 2 photographs also to tell you about something that not a lot of people know about this piece. So if you look at this this part of it, do you see where my cursor is? Which is what I call the tail. I actually didn't know how exactly the piece was going to be installed in the museum. So the piece has 3 different bottoms, 3 different tails. Here it is with me in the studio. This is one iteration in which it slides onto the floor and kind of touches the floor. But then when I got to the museum, there was what do you call it? This thing on the floor.
Baseboard.
A baseboard. And I knew that there might be a baseboard, but I wasn't sure if there was going to be. So I made it this new tail, and it went up. But yeah, so this is Mom. It's all porcelain. It's about 12 feet wide and about 9 feet tall. And it's a figure, it's a snake-like figure that has a head on one side and a tail on the other side. And in the middle is this kind of monster with lots of arms and hands and breasts and ears that is doing all these kind of motherly tasks. So this is a bottle brush and shopping bags, and there's a pacifier. This is an image from the side just to kind of show again, it's like a 3D, 2D situation where it's a 3-dimensional sculpture, but it really works like a drawing or a painting on the wall. There's a hand holding a cracked iPhone, a hairbrush. This is a little hair barrette. This is her face. And I'm using all the same kind of methods that you saw in pieces before, where I create these wrinkles and these problems in the porcelain. Usually when craftspeople, when ceramics artists work with porcelain, they endeavor to reach kind of the smoothest, whitest texture that you can, which is what porcelain is known for. But porcelain also does this thing that I love, which is porcelain never forgets anything you've done to it. And if you ever crack it or wrinkle it in any way, it'll show up after you've fired it. And I kind of accentuate that, and I rub pigment into all those cracks and all those wrinkles to show that even more. Here's a detail. So there's really a lot of line work and a lot of drawing that's basically kind of etched into the porcelain.
So I want to say that the difference, if there is one, of this piece is that it's kind of surprisingly literal.
Yeah.
You know, almost, you could almost say illustrational.
Yeah.
Because there are all these elements you can recognize.
Yeah.
Okay, there's the snake-like human, it's a kind of human snake-like body. Which is again linear, but then there are all these things that you can recognize. So there's almost like a folk art side to it,
Yeah,
which isn't negative in any way. And I think it's, in a way, it's kind of courageous that you did that, because you're much less kind of relying on the abstraction, you know, the kind of power of the abstraction,
yeah,
in tandem with figurative suggestion, because here it's not a suggestion, it's really there.
Yeah, you know what happened is
and I remember,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember you saying that you did a drawing when you were suffering from motherhood.
Yes.
And it was a drawing when you had a little time to yourself finally, and that you did just as there you go, and that you thought you'd never show anybody.
Yeah.
And you know, I would say, so why do you think you would never show anybody? Because then it becomes a sculpture that you decide you will show to people. It's even now in the museum.
Yeah, it's
so
the
that's
biggest
kind of
sculpture I've
assuming
ever
this
made.
Yeah, where you were kind of, it's almost like art therapy about your state at the time, and it's very, as I said, very, very, very literal about all of those elements of motherhood and the different tasks and objects and so on.
Yeah.
So I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about that kind of change from saying, oh, this is just something I'm not going to show to anybody, and then assuming responsibility for this and taking it much further.
Yeah, you know, I think in short, COVID happened. But I can be more specific about it. I think, yeah, so like you said, I made this drawing totally for myself while my kid was napping. My daughter she's now going to be back in daycare, but we were home with her for a very long time during the pandemic. And yeah, I made this drawing during one of her nap times. I don't, making drawings in colored pencils is not like officially part of my practice. It's not something that I do, but I just did it to really comfort myself. And it's a self-portrait. It's a self-portrait of how I felt, like this kind of creatures that's just doing everything. And I sent it to a few friends of mine who are moms. I sent it to my own mother. And I didn't need to explain anything to them when they saw it. They knew exactly what this drawing was about. And it was kind of, yeah, just a secret, personal, private thing for me that I didn't even think about as art. Then I went to Marissa Newman Gallery in New York, where I was just finished being in a group show, where I showed, we're not going to have time to see them, but I showed these kind of early versions of the method that I'm using for mom. But they're all fingers. They're just hands and fingers. They're called finger tangles. And Marissa just kind of off the cuff asked me, oh, I hear that the Bronx Biennial is going to happen. What are you going to show? And I said, oh, I'm not sure. I think maybe something that hangs on the wall. I really had no idea, but I felt like I had to say something. So I just said the first thing that came to my mind. And then on the drive back, which was 2 hours long, I had a lot of time to think. And I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to make this drawing. I'm going to make this. And I had the whole idea for the piece kind of in my head. I knew exactly what I was going to make. I've never made something of this scale before. I said, I'm going to take the drawing, and I have some pictures from the studio. I'm going to cut it up. I'm going to make it on my table. This is me on the kitchen table. Then I'm going to blow it up in paper. So it's 1-to-1 in paper. And then I'm going to use the paper to make I like figured it all out. And then I just made it. And I think that what happened was that like everybody, I'm just so tired of this pandemic. And I think it made me tired of a lot of other things that I was tired of in my life, including this worrying about having to kind of codify pieces of my biography into abstraction because I'm somehow afraid that they won't come off like professional enough or slick enough or interesting enough. And I said, if this is where I'm at right now, then this is what I'm going to make. Like, I don't care. This is my truth right now. And maybe I'll go back to something more abstract later. But this is where I'm at now.
I mean, I think it would really come into its own if it was shown with some of those other pieces that we talked about, including the photographs, including the collapse pieces. You know,
Yeah.
you need a retrospective. Sorry.
I agree with you, Alan. Yeah.
Well, maybe we've been talking for an hour, more than an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether.
Do you want to look to see if there's any questions? People can write them in the chat.
I don't think there are any questions in the chat, but we could, you know, if people have questions, they can ask them. Diana could unmute people.
People can unmute their videos and microphones. Let me look at the chat as well.
I think if
Okay.
Diana is out there, I'm sure she is. She probably has to unmute people. I don't think they can do it themselves.
I think if you have a question, I think people can unmute their own microphones and cameras if you want to ask something.
I
can give it a minute.
Well, Sophia, I don't know whether we.
Hi.
Oh, there we go.
How are you,
Alun? Sophie.
Hola. It was like really fascinating to see the whole work together. I've been seeing it since Triangle, so it was really, really fun. You did not talk about one piece that I thought was really interesting, and I also feel that I don't know, maybe you talked, like at some point my Zoom went off, but the piece that you made with your husband, I think it was a lunch space also, like that vessel piece, which was like, I think it was the first vessel piece of yours that I saw, and I had just moved to New York, and I feel like I don't know, there's like a whole thing of like you as the vessel, like representing yourself as the vessel that starts there.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know. It looks like it looked like a research thing at the moment, but at the same time it was kind of like an allegory for me, like of your relationship and like, you know, this search. And then when you mentioned everything else, that like I didn't know you were pregnant in that show, and all those things. So I don't know, I was wondering if you kind of, I know you spoke about the vessel being like a representation of, you know, yourself in many ways, but it also, I don't know, I feel like it kind of became you in a way.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that like that image of the vessel, the container in relation to motherhood, in relation to artwork, like I'm definitely not the first artist that's made that analogy. But yeah, you know, it's definitely, it's an image that keeps coming back, like something that you're holding inside of you. And, you know, I'm always also thinking of the kind of the psychoanalytic context, because it's something that I so grew up in as the child of a psychoanalyst. You also talk about holding and containing inside that context, that the therapist helps hold the feeling or the experience that the patient is trying to elaborate. And in a way, I think that artists have a similar function, that we hold certain concepts and certain feelings for our audience. And so you go to an exhibition to help you feel what you're already experiencing, to help you kind of to echo that back to you.
Do you see that show as such now? Like as it was like a kind of, I don't know, like a representation of your relationship as well?
Yeah,
Like
I mean, I collaborated with Daniel a few times, and every time it was super, you know, it was a reflection of our relationship, even if our topic was something completely different. It was the fruit of our collaboration, for sure. Yeah.
There's another question, if I may.
Yeah.
Which I hadn't noticed. It's from Cynthia Roberts. Hello, Cynthia. And Cynthia says, do you see a kind of invented mythology in this work? The toggle between monumental and personal in your work is intuitively balanced.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, you're so right, Cynthia, totally. Yeah, I do. In a nutshell, I think that the reason for me that mythology is so powerful, that ancient mythology stories are so powerful, is because we do see ourselves in them, because they are amazing metaphors for the human condition. So I'm very, very drawn to mythological narratives. If you think of like the ancient curses, the figures in Greek mythology and other mythologies that are doomed to repeat something, you can think of that as an analogy for trauma or for cultural trauma. I definitely see a huge connection between the mythological and the personal. Like, I think the reason mythologies, mythological stories, and fables and folk stories endure throughout history is because they stay relevant, because they are actually very, very true on a personal level. So definitely this, you know, this snake woman is for sure kind of a mythological looking creature. Here she is. Yeah, and I definitely feel like she's me.
And on that note, there's another question from Leora Bartour.
Hi, Leora.
Talking about this piece, which says it's a fascinating piece. Is this your true self that you feel more ready and free today to expose?
I mean, it's my true self right now. You know, talk to me in 10 years and I'll probably be making different work about having a teenager or doing something completely different. Yeah, this is me now. And also I have to say, all the works before that were also me, because I think that when you're, you know, even when you tell a lie, the lie is the truth in a way, because the lie is the thing that you've chosen to tell instead of the truth. And that is also a kind of truth about yourself. So I feel like all those pieces, they represent who I truly was at the time. You know, when I was making those pieces that were more encoded in abstraction, we didn't look a lot at these pieces, but they're kind of easy to understand, I think. These are also pieces I made kind of more advanced into my pregnancy. And they are about, you know, bulging, collapsing, having these bumps. Sorry, this is not very good resolution. This is better. So these are completely abstract works, but in that time I was in such a physical place, so not narrative, not like the baby didn't really exist outside of me, didn't exist at all outside of me at that moment. Everything that I had was a very physical truth. That these were very, very, for me, they were not abstract. For me, they were a complete representation of what was going on. I just didn't tell anybody that I was pregnant. But the pieces knew that I was pregnant. You know, the truth is in the artwork.
Well, you know, in the end, that's I want to say that that's what art always is. It's not the thing itself. It's a representation, or it's an artifice and an illusion of that thing, and you can exaggerate it or do what you want with it.
Yeah.
And you know, it kind of confirms what I've been thinking all along, that in fact all of your work is autobiographical, even though you know, perhaps for some time, or in some cases it kind of pretended that it wasn't. And again, it gets back to Camus. You're just making the same piece, which is telling your life story every day.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess that's probably where we should end it. It's never good to carry on too much longer over an hour.
That's true.
So I'm going to say
now I
thank
can
you
see
to
the chat.
everybody who attended, and it's so wonderful to see you again, Gabriela.
It's so good to see you, Alan, and it's like it's so nice to talk about my work with someone who has known it for over a decade.
Yeah.
It's such a gift. It's so rare to have an in-depth conversation with someone who also has that perspective. So thank you. Like I think I kind of, obviously I kind of know that my work is about me, but it's so nice to hear someone else say that and see the connection, that it's not like I'm floundering in a new space every time, but really it's all in the same vein. That's really good to hear. And
maybe, you know, in the way that you decided to go for it with Mom and just follow your nose in a way.
Yeah.
Since you know, we now know that you're making the same piece and it's about you. Maybe that's easier. You can just steam ahead and do it. Yeah, I can use that to liberate me, and I definitely feel like this piece has liberated me in many ways. Great. Yeah. Wonderful. Oh, thank you. I'm seeing people's feedback now in the chat. That's very nice. Thank you so much. There's some feedback in Hebrew that you might not be able to read, Alan, but it's also very nice. Great. Cool. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and don't forget to keep an eye on Triangle and what Triangle is doing. We didn't really we touched on that, but you know, it's a global network of opportunities for artists, and I hope that Gabriela will be able to do something else with Triangle somewhere in the world one of these days. Me too. Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. This was great. Okay, bye everybody. Bye.